Hi, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me well? Okay, let's start. Welcome to the WoVaS Forum. I would like to thank you all who registered for this event and my special acknowledgement to the panelists. Before introducing our speakers, I would like to talk a little bit about the WoVaS project. We are an open network aimed to promote valuation of women in vascular surgery, strongly connected through social media. And now we are starting our first virtual meeting for discussion of some important issues in vascular surgery. WoVaS was born in Brazil from an initiative of Latin vascular surgeons, and quickly we added participants worldwide through our social networks. It is important to emphasize that WoVaS is committed with the diversity and inclusion. So to participate in the forum, you just need to subscribe at our website, womenvascularsurgery.com. Then you will receive an email containing the logistic plan for the events and a form for you to fill regarding your availability to speak on the panels, live broadcast, and to talk about your preferred topic or your intention to write for our newsletter or becoming a mentor. So all the women in vascular surgery are welcome. And if you are an industry representative and have the intention to support the forum, you also can subscribe at our website, and you will receive a sponsor form to fill according to your interest. Well, I'm Fernanda Costa Sampaio Silva, a vascular surgeon and vascular sonographer practicing in Brazil. I'm also a researcher at Federal University of Bahia, Brazil, and I'm a part of the Health Information Research Unit of McMaster University in Canada, and founder of the WoVaS Forum. So let's begin the panel, Women in Aortic Surgery, Navigating Relationships with the Industry. This event particularly is an initiative of Dr. Kathryn who is board certified vascular surgeon in practice at Christiana Care Vascular Specialties in Delaware. She also works with general surgery residents from Christiana, as well as integrated cardiac surgery residents from the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Bossa is co-director of the Aortic Health Program at Christiana, which is still in development, and she will manage the discussion together with me. We are pleased to welcome Dr. Rana Afifi. She's a vascular surgeon and assistant professor in the Department of Cardiothoracic and Vascular Surgery at the UT McGovern Medical School, and is affiliated with the Memorial Hermann Hospital at Texas Medical Center. Dr. Afifi is the program director of the Advanced Aortic and Structural Heart Fellowship at the Department of Cardiothoracic and Vascular Surgery at the UT Health. And we are also honored to receive Dr. Eanas Yassa. She is the section chief of vascular surgery at the Spectrum Health Frederick and Lena Media Heart Center in Grand Rapids, and serves as associate program director for the Spectrum Health Michigan State University Vascular Surgery Integrated Residency and Fellowship Programs. We are pleased to welcome Dr. Jean Starr. She's professor of clinical surgery in the Division of Vascular Diseases and Surgery at the Ohio State University Medical Center. Dr. Starr is past president of the Midwestern Vascular Surgical Society and acts as a mentor for high school and medical students, as well as residents and fellows. I will ask for the speakers, the panelists to join us with the video and unmute themselves. So, Kathryn, you have the word now.
Hi, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Just to introduce, how this came about. It's a project that kind of naturally evolved from our social media relationships, how we all kind of came together, whether connecting on Facebook, the WhatsApp group, or Twitter. And we've been connecting and supporting each other in this informal way with different discussions. And so we really found that there is this need for support, mentorship, and representation in aortic surgery specifically. As I've talked with a lot of other young vascular surgeons who are, whether they're starting aortic programs or, newly made co-directors, trying to figure that out. But then you're talking more with other people, just other vascular surgeons, just the everyday questions that may come up specific to aortic surgery. So we thought that it would be good to formalize this a little bit and have a little more focused discussions. And so thank you all for coming, and thank you to our speakers. I'm very excited to hear about this topic of navigating relationships with industry. So who was going to go first, Fernanda?
I think I'll go first, right? Yeah, so we'll share my screen. Right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. Hopefully you hear me well?
Yeah.
So, good. So hopefully we're able to share a little bit of our insight and some of our experience to try and answer some of the questions and talk about the topics. So we're asked to kind of give our opinion and talk about relationships with industry. And so I chose to talk a little bit about what you need maybe to know about it and how to navigate those relationships and what are the important things about it. Because a lot of us actually at some points we have questions how to do it, but some of us also would have questions of some concerns or fears just based on unfamiliar kind of territory. Those are my disclosures as fits here. And then this page, this is basically, if you go to the website of an open payments data at the cms.gov, basically any one of us, any of the physicians can go in, put their names and see what is it that's reported out there by the companies. And this is basically, it goes usually a year behind. And so this is my page there for the year 2019. And this is before I've done some of the consultations that I'm doing. So even when I thought I didn't have any relationships with industry, I'm already reported at a certain amount of money, and it shows you how you do compared to industry, and it shows you which companies and what, and most of it are probably dinners and luncheons and conferences and meetings. And the years that were higher, there were courses that I was invited to go and industry covered. So all these things that we think that are not, they're probably going to be there. So a lot of the people that are watching or listening, if you go to this website, you'll be surprised to see what is it that's reported under your name. So at least you can get familiar with that. Why is that important? Why is it even publicly out there? So in 2013, in August, basically the Sunshine Act became a law, and in its formal way that we know right now. And it's basically the companies, whether it's medical devices, pharmaceutical, biological, that participate in the U.S. federal healthcare programs. They have to track and report certain payments and items of value that are given to physicians and teaching hospitals. They need to do that on an annual basis, and it's publicly available, as you saw that on that website. The manufacturers and group purchasing organizations, they must also report ownership interests held by physicians and their immediate family members. And when you talk about immediate family members, it states in different universities, we can see that it means not just, families that are brothers or sisters or fathers. It's also people that mainly you depend, have a shared household and depend financially on each other. So basically the organizations or relationship between industry and physicians is a little bit of complex, but all of us want and say that we want advancement of medical knowledge eventually, or we care about patients, improving patient care. But if we look into it a little bit more, the physician's goal eventually is to promote his patient's best interest and patient's care. Industry wants to improve patient care, but eventually we need to to kind of recognize and understand that the goal of it is also to promote profitability. It's a little bit difficult to maintain companies without having that part. So that's one of the main goals that will be there for the companies, and it's important to remember it. Collaboration can bring to great medical advancement, but it also can be perceived negatively by the public, sometimes by even our own, not just by the public, but by physicians. It can be mismanaged. The reason it's perceived negatively, it has been mismanaged in the past and has been abused. And so there's a reason that this act came about, and it's not because of the majority of the people that do it, but because of the minority of them, but it does exist and it is there. So it's important to remember why it has this negative connotation. That's why some of us are a little bit hesitant as to even explore it or even think that they want that headache. Industry also often provides support for educational programs. That's what most of us know them and know that relationship as, supporting a fellowship, residency, continuing medical education programs, and major conferences and events at medical societies. So we can't talk really about relationship with industry without touching a little bit about some of the concepts in it. So what is conflict of interest? So when we're talking about physician or individual person, then we're talking when there's a conflict between physician's interest and the patient's interest. So if you're getting money from a company and a certain company, and you think that maybe you want to push more of that device, but it's not in the patient's best interest, and you end up deciding to do that, that's one of the conflict of interest. So you need to think about those things. That's why it's important, or at least if it's perceived. So you need to be aware of that. Departmental, when the financial interest of the department may influence the faculty members' behavior to have that gain for the department, that goes into the industry supported trials and other decisions like that. Institutional, when financial interest of an institution might appear to affect the policy for the review and oversight of research projects. And then society as medical or society interests of that society may potentially influence some of the members to behave differently. So it's important to understand the conflict of interest. Another concept is conflict of commitment. And so if someone engages in an external activity, either paid or unpaid, that is in conflict with their primary obligation and commitment to the university. So that's another type of conflict that it's important to know that exists and that you need to report it. So despite all of these things that seem to be, troublesome, headache, why do we even need to think about it? So why even consider relationships with industry? First of all, especially in vascular surgery, innovation is a key. We are moving forward. We're trying to improve our patients' health and care. We're trying to do minimal invasive procedures. It's a little bit difficult to see this happening without seeing advancement in technology. And if we want to develop the best devices, then it makes sense to have best collaborations between physicians who understand the disease and the patients and the anatomy and physiology, and the engineers who may actually help us develop the solutions because we don't have it. So the collaboration is actually important to try to push for innovation. I think for our field, it's one of the fields that's really, really important in it, and it happens a lot. So as a physician, you can be a consultant or an advisory board for some of those companies, and you can hear about many of those. You think about it. Sometimes you question whether you want to do it or not. Some of the questions here that come up are, what's your role as a physician? What about the intellectual property? Things get a little bit more complicated and not as easy to explain. But that's where you need to think about some advice and help. And I know I needed that at some point. You go for some legal advice. Some people know the laws better than you, know the intellectual property laws more than you. You can approach it. There are in each university legal departments for that. And so if you choose to do it through the university, they're probably going to take care of that. If you choose to do it privately, you're probably going to have to think about taking someone's advice and look into that. But if you do it through university, you need to think about the fact that the university's goals or interests might not be able to kind of meet the interests of the company or the industry. And so sometimes that kind of conversation might end up with you losing that opportunity. So you need to be kind of thinking about where you're willing to lose, what you're willing to draw the line. From my own experience, I've been in conversations about certain activities that I did it through the university, that the university had a little bit more requests that the industry could not really agree to. And we ended up deciding that I'm not going to do those activities, but that was my choice. That was something that I've already put ahead of time always, so that my job and my commitment to the patients. And if my university sees that it's a little bit of a conflict of an interest, then I'm not going to fight that. That made me know that there is someone who actually looks for these things, even if I miss them. So that's my way of doing it. But I think it's an important part, especially when we're not that familiar with all the legality and legal issues of it. What about ownership? Some people have ideas and they want to come up with an idea. They want to invest in an idea because sometimes we understand it, we know it, it's our field. So do we really stay out of it? The headache that comes with it, believe me, if you think about it too much, we probably decide not to do it. I kind of learned that a little bit the hard way this past year. And I know other of my partners are even big because they're even starting a startup. It's even worse and more difficult. But if it's something that you're interested in, if it's something that you think that really will benefit your patients and you believe in it, there are ways to look into it. There are ways to check and kind of see how you can do it in a safe way, meaning that you're not hurting yourself or your patients by missing things that you don't know. And again, I go to the legal departments, and honestly, it took almost a year between a certain entity and the university to get to an agreement where everyone is happy without me having to kind of give up that opportunity. And it's because I was very transparent and open with both sides. I said that first comes my job at the university, first comes my commitment to my patients. And if we can't find a way that we ensure that to be safe and good, then I'm not going to do it. But then it takes them back and forth to do it. The university teams, that's what they needed. And in each department or in each university, you're going to find legal department. There are departments that literally manage conflict of interest. And so there are people that's their main job. And I didn't know that until I started getting emails, but they know me very well in the past year because this has been happening, but they've been a great help. And I realized that by being very transparent with them, that helped them help me. And so it is doable. If we think about it ahead of time, we're probably not going to do it, but it is doable if you're interested in it. So the next thing other than innovation, now we have some of the techniques, but we also want to advance the knowledge and education about it. So that's maybe the more common things that we know of industry, being building the programs for education, speakers, all the meetings that we talk about, all the meetings that we go to. So that's one way to collaborate with industry. The other way is support for educational programs. My first connection with industry was a few years ago through the fellowship that I'm directing, because I needed to look for maybe ways to sponsor part of the activities in that. And I found out that most of the companies, they have on their website options for grants, for educational grants. So there are ways to do it. There are ways to get to go around it. And I found out that at university, there's a full department that's going to help you fill it out and help you navigate that. So there are people who are going to help you, even when you don't know the ins and outs, but those things exist. So if you're thinking of a program or you're a director of a program, there are ways for you to get some support to kind of advance your education, but you need just to look for it. Again, it doesn't mean it's not. So even though, because it goes to the university through the university, it'll probably not show up on my personal profile when you go for the public activity, I still put it in, I put it as still in my conflict of interest or my disclosures when you're speaking and when you're going to write papers that are relevant and stuff like that, because I think it is just being transparent and honest about it. And then recognition. We can't deny that people that we see their faces a lot in those meetings get more known. They become known as experts in the field. I think that's part of what brought this to discussion, that a lot of times some of certain groups and women in particular felt that they were or underrepresented. So we think that maybe that also can help promote you as an expert in a field. Of course, it can't be done just because you want it. You need to have something to back it up. You have to have the resume. And I think later on, we'll hear a little bit about ways to kind of promote that and promote yourself. But those are things that are why we maybe want to be part of this relationship. And so if this speaks to you and you want to do it, the first part of the talk shouldn't discourage you from doing it. You just need to think about how can you manage that conflict of interest. So you think about, first of all, it's recognition. You need to recognize the fact that there is a possibility that that kind of relationship is going to influence your patient care, because there are unconscious biases, and that exists. As much as you want to try, there is always a part that might slip here and there. So when you're aware of that, and you kind of implement a way for something or someone to kind of be that accountability check, that also helps. And that's by learning your institutional rules and laws. So you have someone, again, I can't emphasize it enough, you have someone else who's expert on those things, who can look into it and say, no, I think this is going to be too much, you can't really manage it, or you know what, yes, we can help you, let's do that. So one, when you're aware of it, when you think about it, when you're going to do it, you're going to be minimizing that. Then you're going to need to recognize some limitations. So one of the other things that I discovered while I was doing it, and also I discovered it because one of my colleagues had made the mistake before, because they did not realize. So if you're outside of the US, you're going to have to check the laws and rules of each country. It's different. Even in the US, some of the laws between different states are different. But in the US, if you're not a citizen and you're on a US visa, basically your visa requirements, and you need to look into it. Some visas don't allow you to be getting payments from other than the entity that supports your visa. So meaning if you by mistake did not know that, and you had a consultant agreement with a company and you got paid, and someone found out, that's a reason for them. That's a cause for deportation. And people don't know how, yes, it is very serious. And so that makes it then, okay, so you can't do it at all? No, you can. And so the way around it is to do the agreements as a consultant through the university. Again, complicates it. But in my mind, I think that kind of introduced for me the safer way for me. And even now, if I at any point even am allowed or able to, I doubt that I'm going to do it outside of the university, because I found that that's for me the safest way to ensure that that conflict of interest is really checked and I'm not missing anything. But it's important to kind of be familiar with all these things so you can do it right and not end up hurting yourself or damaging yourself. Again, the disclosures are important. I can't emphasize that enough. And basically, you just want to minimize some of the activities that might not be needed or reason. So if you don't really need to go just for free drinks and free lunches all the time, that minimizes some of those activities. So choose the things that are significant or important to you, kind of give away the things that maybe are not as important. So how do you improve your participation? And I think this is something that Eanas will be touching more on and giving her experience about it more. But just in a nutshell, it's networking and self-representation. You need to advocate for yourself. You need to have a good network and good relationship with the industry or representative or industry that work with you. In my case, I had really good sponsorship and mentorship, meaning that sometimes you need someone to speak for you and advocate for you. So one of the things I didn't touch about is primary investigators, research supported by industry. And those are things that are also considered as things that you need to report and as part of conflict of interest. But unfortunately, a lot of us don't know really how to be chosen as a primary investigator. How does that happen? Sometimes we didn't even know about it. I'm lucky to be working in a team that the people that lead our research department also at some point know your interest and know when opportunities open up. And so they suggest for fair and diverse opportunities. And I ended up being able to be a primary investigator on a few of those industry trials. And one of the things that were shocking, and to me, I think, and some have already heard it, that one of those trials that have been going on for a few years and over 100+ locations worldwide in a very big company, when one of the meetings that we were met, one of the comments were, "We are so happy you are our first female PI." And my reaction was, I'm so sorry. I don't think that that's a good reason to celebrate. I mean, how is it that in 2020, we are still having only one female PI in the aortic industry study that's been going on for years? And unfortunately, I think that's the things that brought these discussions is how do you do it? How do you change it? So one of the things I think you do is, first of all, really look into mentorship and sponsorship and kind of make sure that you're working with people that are going to promote you. And then once you're there, have those discussions with industry and people, advocate for others. Try to see how you can change the reality and not just accept it. And I think that's what we're doing right here. And we're going to hear a little bit more about it. But I think when I mentioned that example, it's not to kind of speak down on the industry about that, but it's that once we started having that conversation, industry started realizing, you know what, maybe there is something that we also can do. And I think this meeting speaks for itself. And I think that even if the industry represents maybe some part of the audience here, and hopefully it'll kind of promote more discussion about it and improve it as well. So to summarize it again, just be aware of the conflict of interest, recognize it. It sometimes is mismanaged and can be abused. Become familiar with the laws and regulations of your institution. Don't hesitate going to them, asking for advice. Even if you go for advice and decide to go individual, I think it's important to hear from some experts about it and learn more about it. Try to eliminate and reduce some of those conflict of interest. Network, advocate for yourself, and seek mentorship and sponsorship in this field. And once you establish good relationship with industry, advocate for diversity and others. And I think we'll take questions at the end. Thank you. And I'll stop sharing. And I think, Eanas, the screen is yours.
Okay, let's hear Dr. Eanas talking about.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Fernanda and Kate, for putting this together. I think that's just phenomenal that you know, already, you know, when I come to my first slide, it'll be what's your goal? And I think you guys have already sort of seen where there is change that needs to be made and had an eye on the goal. Thank you, Rana, for that great introduction as to the things that people need to think about if they're going to be stepping into this. So I put this picture up because this is a picture that was taken during the first deployment of a TXD, the cook dissection system, outside of clinical trial, and which is sort of how I think for a lot of people, you know, my name got brought into this at all. I should caution everyone that the patient was aware pictures were being taken during her case and that they would be used for teaching, educational, and promotional purposes. So just to be clear. So again, as I mentioned, I am a part of the Speaker Bureau and a consultant, which I think is why I'm here. I wanted to cover more after Rana's great introduction about what do you need to think about, what do you need to know before you even foray into this. I wanted to talk a little bit more about so now that you know those things and you've thought about it, where are you, how are you really going to take those first few steps? Because I think that's a big black box for a lot of people in general, and it certainly was for me, and I think for a lot of women who feel sort of unsure about how do you kind of tiptoe into this arena if it's a thing that you want to do. So we're going to kind of go over these concepts. And the first one I think that is most important is goal setting. You know, we're all really good at setting goals. We didn't get as far as we did because we're not great goal setters. But I think the question is, now you're pursuing a different goal, and what is it? Why do you want to build a relationship with industry? Good, bad, indifferent, all of the things that Dr. Afifi talked about to reflect on. But really, it's more about, you know, what is the agenda? For me, I can speak personally. The driving force for me was that I really wanted to have a forum through which to educate people who were not going to the meetings, not sitting in on high-level talks about the evolution of treatment of aortic dissections. I wanted a forum through which to educate those people, those surgeons out there who, you know, maybe they see 1-2 aortic dissections a year. For me, it was very important that with my background and my experience, I was fortunate enough to train with kind of the primary investigators for some of the dissection stent systems, that I wanted to take that knowledge and say, hey, if you are not sure, you know, think about these basic things and then reach out to someone who can help you. And that was my goal. And I was very transparent about that. And that's a part of what I came and what I think anyone who is starting to talk to industry about, whether it's being a speaker, being a consultant, wanting to be a PI, you have to think about the fact, as Rana brought up, that everyone in the device industry is running a business. And that seems obvious when said out loud, but I think sometimes, because we are coming from a serve the patient, and of course, industry wants to serve the patient. They want good outcomes. They want patients to do well, but there is this, kind of additional thing that they're accountable to, which is, the dollars and cents of running a business. And we are accountable to the dollars and cents of how we take care of our patients. And those goals have to merit. You do have to reflect on, through relationships and talking with your local reps, which I think is the best way to begin to understand, what is the goal of the company that you're trying to build a relationship with? What is their kind of area that they need help? And how can you then, understanding what their goal is and understanding what your goal is, find a match, if you will. We're all very familiar with match in residency programs. And I liken it a little bit too, for anyone who's ever watched the show Shark Tank. Those entrepreneurs who walk into the Shark Tank, have an idea as to who is going to be the best investor to partner with them and take their, product or device or idea to the next step. But also on the behalf of the investor group, the investor panel invests in something that fits their portfolio. So, there is, in addition, while there's the exciting part of it and the part that makes you want to say, just help me get my foot in the door, just help me get out there. There does have to be a match of goals, and it takes some time to reflect on what is your goal, be transparent about your goal, and then be transparent about how you can help whatever company it is that you're seeking to work with achieve what you think is their goal. So, for me, what I knew was that as these devices, the devices that sort of I'm most familiar with, are coming out of clinical trial, what's really important to the company is that the device is in the hands of people who know how to use it and know how to have good outcomes. And that's, personally a thing that I capitalized on. I said, you want this, these devices, you want the people talking about this to be people who had experience. And, that's a thing that I can speak to. There's a lot of things that I'm not the best person to go to. So you have to be honest with yourself and set that goal. And then, this goes forays into my next statement, which, anyone who knows me will say, you have to be your own number. This is a thing I say all the time, be your own number one fan. There's nothing wrong with knowing the things that you do well and being able to speak to them confidently. This is taken from, for anyone who doesn't read the Harvard Business Review, I highly recommend it, because certainly as a woman sort of transitioning into leadership or business in any way, and just even we're all leaders by virtue of the roles that we play in our teams, and for your patient. So, kind of learning a little bit about how do people do that well in other industry, I think has been invaluable to me. And this, article about how do successful female networkers get around it. And I think this is what Rana was referencing. You do have to be efficient with your time. So no one has all the time in the world. Go to the things that you think are going to be valuable. Absolutely, you don't have to go out and have drinks every time someone invites you. However, just like anything else, if, meeting with that industry rep or meeting with that, research lead for the company, or meeting with that regional sales manager is going to help you attain your goal, then absolutely go and meet them, but be, again, kind of clear and direct in your communication, so you're not wasting your time and you're not wasting someone else's time. I think for a lot of people who think that these things are just relationships that you sort of fall into and stumble into, that happens, I'm sure, for some people, but I think that for the majority of people, there's some structure around how you spend your time. And I think even the people who make it look like it happened flawlessly and accidentally for them will say, that at the end they were intentional about their time, how they spent it, and what their asks and their goals were. And again, sort of to reiterate number 2, just, be unabashedly honest about what you think you're good at and what your institution is good at. So when I think about my institution, I think about the thing that myself and my partners are great at is building relationships, partnering with other divisions within our organization. And, anytime that we as an organization or a participant in a clinical trial, we ensure every person who's a part of our division wants the clinical trial to be successful. So that's a big strength of our organization. You know what the strengths of your organization are, and you know what your strength is as an individual surgeon. And it's okay to say those things out loud, and it's okay to call attention to them. And in fact, you should, because nobody else is sitting out there waiting to cheer you on. And that's okay, that's life. You just have to be able to speak honestly and confidently about the things you're good at and the things that you're not. And then, being nimble and open, which is one that I don't think we always think about in terms of medicine, because it's not a thing we're taught. But there is a component of, we were speaking earlier before everyone joined the meeting about when you go to meetings, how often are women in meetings, and we're sort of, I can speak personally and quite transparently, not sure who you're supposed to meet, not sure where you're supposed to sit. You kind of, feel like if I don't already know people, I'm not going to put myself out there. And reading these articles and talking to people in business, you learn until you meet the people you wouldn't otherwise meet. You're not going to have the opportunities to understand what their needs are and have conversations about what your strengths are, and come with your asks, because you won't know who those people are that you need to come to. And someone brought this to my attention after a conference I was recently invited to speak at, which is just the very act of being in the front of the room and speaking up, brings attention to the fact that you have something valuable to say. And whether it's industry reps or other vascular surgeons, that's important, because that's how we get to know each other, and that's how we learn how each person thinks, and that's how we share ideas, even in this forum. I think the other component of this that I learned is identifying who is the D. We in business speak, you learn who is the decider at the end of the day. So you speak to your local reps. Absolutely, you feel like maybe I've spoken to my local rep and I don't feel like they're maybe understanding what it is that my ask is, or maybe I'm just one of many who are asking this of them. Don't be afraid to kind of go up the ladder, if you will. Don't be afraid to say, hey, who's your regional manager? I would really like to meet with the head of education for fill in the blank. I'd really like to know what's coming down your pipeline. I'd really like to meet with, these people. There's nothing, you should absolutely feel empowered to do those things. But when you have those meetings again, hopefully you've spent a little bit of time before the meeting to identify what it is your goal is, understand what the company's goal is, so you can be respectful of their time and yours, and identify, hey, we have a shared goal here, and I think I can help you accomplish it. I think that you can help me and I can help you, and we can have this, wonderful symbiosis that helps patients. And I think the very worst thing that can come of this is that someone says, no, thanks. In which case, I think sometimes a lot of women very much internalize that. I don't want to speak for every woman by any means on the talk, but sometimes we internalize that and say, oh, it means that I'm not good enough, or it means that, they don't want to hear from me, or, you put all these additional things on it. And I would say, maybe it's just not right now. Maybe it's just hey, we'd love to, but we don't have room for that right now. We're going to keep you in mind. And don't let that kind of completely dissuade you. You do have the option to say, okay, great, I'm going to reach out in a month and see what my options are then, or what have you. But I think the worst thing that can happen is that you don't try, or you perceive a no as, that's it, the doors are shut forever. I speak from, great stories that have been shared with me from my mentors and some of my partners who've been very successful at getting, our organization into clinical trials. And part of it is just saying, hey, I'm going to cut through, the fray here and go straight to who I think is the decider. and tell them what I think we have to offer. And I'm going to be efficient about my ask. And if they say no, they say no. And if they say yes, great, I've accomplished something. But I came in with a goal and I thought about it. And so, you know, this brings me to what I think is also really important, which is, so now say you've established this relationship, you're asked to speak on a topic, or you're given the option to be a PI or a consultant or anything in a relationship with industry. How do you maintain your credibility? This is very important to me because and I think we can all say we've been in these kinds of talks where maybe you hear someone talk and you think, I don't know that you're being completely, you know, you're not just telling, you know, preaching the company line. And there's a part of us, I think, as surgeons that look for that authenticity from each other. So again, this requires some self-reflection. What are you willing to speak about? Remember that when you go and speak, your audience is people who want to hear what you know as a surgeon and a physician first. So that includes things like, when did you make errors? When did, you know, whatever the device you wanted to use, when did you, you know, choose to go a different route? I talk about those things when I go out to speak on anything related to any of the aortic therapies that I'm engaged in. My job isn't to sell product, my job is to educate, and that education is a noble goal. And sometimes, like I said, really my goal is to tell people, I'd like to challenge what you think is the you know, current best practice, or I'd like you to just think for a second about an alternative way of managing something. When I go out and speak, I'll say very transparently the things that didn't work well. And sometimes I'll say, you know, hey, I might be here on so-and-so's, you know, agenda, but I'm going to show you a case where I use something else, but here's why I'm showing it. And I think as long as you're honest with whomever it is that's sponsoring you to speak or bringing you in to speak, you're not going off IFU, you're not talking preemptively about, you know, research trials that you shouldn't be speaking about, of course. You know, you really want people to believe who you are is really who you're presenting yourself to be. So you have to believe in it as well, which kind of goes on to my next goal, and the initial setting of a goal. You know, don't, you know, as I transition to this last line, which I think is really important, try to avoid shooting on yourself. You know, because I think sometimes we think we should be out there. If my name's not out there, you know, then, you know, it's like I'm not doing anything, but you are accomplishing so much on a day-to-day basis. It's great to have the relationship. It's great if you think that that's a thing that you want, but you don't pick up speaking opportunities or opportunities to partner just for the sake of the partnership if you're not gonna get something out of it yourself. So that's sort of what I mean by try not to shoot on yourself. We shouldn't be, if we can reflect on what do we want, where is our goal, how are we going to help get this goal, and how can we further the company's goal, then we have a partnership which is not built on some sort of idea of what we think we should be doing. And, you know, I think speaking to Rana's point about, you know, sometimes you see all these forums and you feel like, how do I get in? How do I, you know, I should be given an opportunity. People should be coming to me. I have things to say. You know, I think just one of the things to remember is that, you know, your outrage doesn't translate into outcomes. You have to bring your best self forward. You have to identify, again, all of the things I talked about before, and then you have to be ready to deliver on them. So don't, you know, put yourself in a position where you can't deliver. I say no to a lot of things because I'm just not going to be able to deliver it, or I don't feel like it fits with my authentic message that I'm trying to put forth, and that's okay. You know, you shouldn't be afraid, or it's best not to be afraid that doors are going to be shut for you just because maybe you didn't want to talk on something that you don't believe in. Just, you know, try and avoid, you know, just getting outraged and angry about something without having a goal attached to it and a means to accomplish that goal, like setting up a great forum like this. So I'll stop screen sharing now because I know Dr. Starr has a lot to say, and we are all very eager to hear from her as well. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my thoughts on this.
Thank you, Eanas. Thank you, Rana. Let's hear Dr. Jean sharing her experience with us.
Thanks. And Eanas and Rana, I think really set up, a great discussion for later and great views. And I really wish I'd heard both those talks probably, 15, 20 years ago. Probably would have helped a lot with where I was going as well. But unfortunately, I didn't have that experience. And I really want to thank Kate and Fernanda and WoVaS for sponsoring this, making it all happen, because I think this is probably a really great forum that maybe even some of our organized societies, could take some lessons from. So thanks very much. Just a little bit of my background. I've been in practice for 26 years. And 2 years ago, I transitioned to working for Medtronic for 50% of my time as a medical safety officer. And I do that at the time I joined with aortic, peripheral, and the endovenous division. They've now reorganized, so I still cover aortic, and then the other operating unit is peripheral vascular health, which encompasses arterial and endovenous work as well. So I do that half of the time. That's a whole nother discussion, which I won't get into managing things, because I don't think that's a good topic for tonight. But I just want to give you that background. And it was very interesting, Eanas, when you talked about falling into things, because I've always thought that all through my life, when I look at things, I've sort of fallen into things. But then when I do look back and look at some decisions that I made along the way, that maybe it was more intentional than I thought it was. But when I was sort of coming through, it wasn't, no one taught me to, you need to goal set, you need to, decide where you're going. That just wasn't something that I was taught, many, many years ago. So it was a good reflection when you said that, that people often think they fall into things, but maybe they don't fall into it as much as you think. The other little background that I'll just give, and I've gotten some numbers from my colleagues at Medtronic, and I did confer with them because I obviously have the outsider view of working with industry, and I wanted to get their viewpoint as well as to what advice maybe I could give back to women vascular surgeons as well. And one of the numbers I want to just quote, because I like to kind of update that, but that it was AAMC in 2019, they were reported there were 15% of the kind of working vascular surgery force in the US were women, but 33% of trainees were women. So I think you can appreciate how things are going to change, in the next, 4 to 5 years, and how we might, expect to be represented in the future and in all aspects of what we do. So just kind of keeping those numbers in your head. When I look back to specifically working with industry, I think what started it for me was building those good base relationships. So, and that could be with whoever you deem. For me, I was in private practice at the time. I was there for about 9 years, and I transitioned to academia for the last more than a decade. And I always respected my reps and their managers and any field personnel. And, they were teaching me, and I appreciated that teaching just as I appreciated when my faculty, taught me when I was a fellow and a resident. And because of that, I think I got that respect back as well. So that's one piece of advice I would give for wanting to work with industries is the nuts and bolts of how to is have a good relationship with the people you work with. If you feel like you don't have a good relationship with your rep, or it's just not somebody you can relate to, then there's other means of doing it. It could be going to, a conference, going to a meeting, just going to the booth where the industry people are working and talking to somebody. Talking to people from medical affairs is usually a great initial connection. If you're in the research arena, then talking to those people. But like Eanas said, and I think Rana said as well, is really expressing what you want. So they're not going to know what you want if you don't express it. And as Eanas said, the worst they can say is no. And, and that's all for us to sort of deal with how we interpret that no, for lack of a better word. So, but they don't know to help us out or to choose us for things unless we express it a little more clearly. So start with the base relationships. I remember, when the reps would kind of say, and this is various companies, I'm not talking about, not all my relationships were obviously with Medtronic, but when I would have an idea and say, well, gosh, why doesn't this device do this? Or it seems like this could be designed a little bit better. And so a lot of times the response was, hey, can we bring an engineer in, or can we bring one of our R&D people in to talk to you about it? So I allowed that, and that required a little more setup, and they wanted to come in and watch some cases, and then I could interact with them more directly about, my thoughts about a product. And so that's another way of expressing your interest in how products are developed. And back to what Eanas was saying as well, and I know, we interpret them as being in a business, and obviously medicine is a business as well. But I was very taken aback when I started at Medtronic of how much they all care for our patients as much as we do. And they may not know them on the same level, but they all want the same goal of helping patients and getting them back to being healthy, because we all have, relatives, family, friends, who are often in the same boat. So I was quite overwhelmed by the caring, at least in Medtronic, of people who really want to help patients. So, we really do have a lot of the same goals in mind. So again, when you talk about, let's go back to talking about relationships again, I think, and I don't want to represent all women either, in saying that I think we have a little bit of a harder time when we have a room full of men around us, and it's just a little different, right? They may go to the bar, they may go golfing, obviously things are a little more limited with the Sunshine Act than they used to be. But if that's not your mantra, then you've got to figure out a way around that. Whether it be, making sure your local reps or managers know what your worth is. So they know, gosh, they may be my aortic rep, but I may be doing a lot of peripheral work. And I really want to be, I want to get into the peripheral arena, or known for that. And those people can actually, meaning reps and field personnel, can really become your sponsors. I am still really good friends. One of my first reps was Boston Scientific rep. And she lives here in Columbus, and we are still very good friends, and she's much higher up in Boston Scientific, but she really helped, amongst other reps, sponsor me. So you talk about sponsors, who are the vascular surgeons or people who tend to be older than you, maybe, are more experienced, but don't underestimate the power of those people around you to sponsor you as well. Because I feel like I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have them, pushing for me, watching, what I did, watching what my skills were. And again, I respected them as much as they respected me. And, that's not always the case, with reps. Sometimes they're not treated as fairly, and they're treated as, here's your salesperson, when really that they're representing more than that as well. And they want good outcomes for your patients also. So again, you may have to expand your definition of what a relationship is with people, rather than just, having a beer or whatever it may be. So as a female, I think we have to kind of work that a little bit different. And sort of, the next step from that is, and I think, I can't remember, Eanas, if you said it or if Rana, you said it, was kind of asking for a higher access, and not necessarily because maybe your field personnel aren't responsive, but that you want to be able to express your willingness to participate with industry on whatever level, whether it be research, whether it be participating in advisory panels, but asking for that next level. So ask to go see the plant where things are made. And this is where my interest in industry came from. I was very interested in how the heck this balloon got put together, and it still baffles me that it happens. But having seen a few more things, if you've never seen a spider filter made, that thing is freaking amazing. It's on this big knitting thing, and it's just it's amazing when I was able to see that in Medtronic one time, and just watching the people who dedicate themselves to making these things. So ask for a manufacturing visit, ask for a VIP visit, which can be combined with talking to some of the leaders and the presidents and vice presidents. They want to talk to you. They don't get access to physicians, so they really want to communicate with you. They want as much from you as you want from them. So ask for those leadership and VIP type visits, and get to know those people on a higher level. My way in doing that was, I was just curious what positions physicians could play in industry. And again, I went through Boston Scientific first. I had a kind of a visit where I met with various people. I met with regulatory people. I met with physicians in medical affairs. And it was just very interesting to me. And I wasn't looking for a job necessarily at that time. I was just looking to understand how it all fits together to get these products to our hands. I asked to meet with Simona Zanetti, who is my boss now. And I wouldn't have known that 10 years ago when I sort of said, hey, can I talk to a physician, in your company who, has been instrumental in making things work on not being, and, not practicing medicine. And so, I don't know if that was, helped at all in my able to work for Medtronic eventually, but it really, I learned a lot from that visit. I think the nuts and bolts are really making yourself available. And I think Eanas talked about this as well, and responsive. So, when you're asked to do something, we're all very busy. You all think, gosh, I don't want to put one more thing on my plate. But usually commitments with industry on that level are sort of limited. And yes, you may have to finagle, like you've talked about, some of the contracts and that sort of thing, and the compliance issues. But, say yes if you can. Certainly don't say yes, you're right, if you're not going to follow through, because that just reflects poorly. But, advisory boards, research committees, there's educational opportunities, whether it be, hey, can I do training at your site for new reps? Can you do a training video for such and such device? Again, some may require more work than others. Some you might not be interested in, others you might. Allowing other physicians to come in and be trained on devices that you're, more familiar with. I jotted some notes on, so I'm kind of looking. Let's say you have a case report. Let's say you have a case that you think is really interesting, but maybe you don't have the means to do it, or a case series, you don't have the means to do that. Or if you have a research idea, go to the medical affairs folks at any industry, and they can hook you up with the right people, and they can decide if it's something that would be mutually beneficial as well. Patient screening. Sometimes there's, mechanisms for vascular screenings that you can work with industry as well. But I think, saying yes more than saying no, it is helpful. Ask, like I said before, ask for what you want. Again, when you talk about being on advisory panels, or why wasn't I asked to do this when this person was asked to do this who is less qualified than I am, it may be that the people who did the choosing didn't know how great you were. So, you're only as good as you are advertising yourself. And somebody sitting in an office, in California, may not know how great you are. So unless you work your way sort of up that pattern of making yourself known and letting them know what your expertise is in, then they won't know. So, you sort of, I don't want to say blame yourself, but you've got to get yourself out there. I think Eanas and Rana both, sort of reflected that as well. I'm trying to think if I had anything else. I think that's probably all the main things that I touched on, that I thought about when I was sort of thinking, was how I kind of got to where I'm at. The other thing is just the nuts and bolts. If you're, and Rana covered a lot of that. Don't forget, you've got a lot of people in academia have two institutions they've got to make happy, right? They have usually the university and the medical center part of it, and then they've got the hospital part of it. So a lot of us have, dual contracts. And so anything that you're going to do with industry, whether it be just consulting, whether it be a research agreement, whether it be an employment agreement like mine is, you have to go through compliance. And there's compliance I found, and no one had done this really before. I had at my institution, there's a cardiologist who really is working very little clinically, but maybe it wasn't done kind of in the formal pattern. And you really should do it the right way and make it very transparent. And I'm happy to talk with anybody afterwards, who wants that kind of information. But you do have to make sure you're compliant both on your end of it as a physician and the industry end of it as well. So both entities will require compliance on their parts to protect themselves. And it can be annoying and it can be tedious, but you have to do it to protect, you for the most part. So I think that's all I've got. Kate or Fernanda, do you want to take over again for questions?
Thank you, Jean. Thank you all for emphasizing the education as the main goal, and define the importance to define our professional identity before starting a relationship with the industry